Kris Edwards is a bit of a legend around Mediaworks. He's assistant content director at The Breeze. He's also one of the friendliest, most positive people you'll ever meet. He also has cerebral palsy, and he's had it all his life. But it's taken nearly 4 decades to talk about it publicly. That's despite being on the radio for nearly 40 years. 40 years? What an old bugger. Now with a new podcast series, he's ready to give cerebral palsy a bit of a voice. And he's with us now. Nice to see you, mate. Welcome.
Oh, thank you very much for having me on the show. I just look very youthful.
Yeah. You don't look a day over for 40, yeah? Have you been in radio 40 years?
Almost. Pretty close.
Wow.
Yeah, I did start very young, like 17 or something like that.
Really?
Yeah.
So you just came straight from school, did you?
Yeah, pretty much. Just sort of nagged my way in.
Oh, what a job.
And I think one of the appeals of this industry at the beginning was the fact that I could be in a studio and people could see me.
Yeah.
Couldn't judge me.
Yeah.
So I think the allure of that, plus playing music for the day, being a DJ, it's a pretty good life.
You sound good on radio, mate.
Yeah, mate.
Hey, so talk me through this. Man, I've always wanted to ask you about this, and we've always talked music and all sorts of things. You know, you're running the assistant buddy head honcho there of The Breeze. You do a great job. What was it like growing up?
There were tough moments back in the 70s and 80s when I was a kid. You just kind of went outside and played and just had to put up with it. And being a disabled kid, I mean, you know, high school you usually get picked in the teams when they line up and say, "We'll have you." I used to get picked last.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't say I was bullied much. It's more exclusion.
Were you bullied though? Was there the odd
comment?
around?
The odd comment. I didn't get beaten up, but it was certainly the odd comment.
Yeah.
So I can understand when people, you know, that high school is particularly tough. Usually primary school, they're nice to you. High school's tough.
Yeah.
So
what high school did you go to?
I went to Tiamutu College.
Right.
Then I did the rest of my high school in Australia, actually.
Right.
So
okay, so you don't remember being picked on, but you do remember it being a bit tough at times.
Yeah, at times. I think because you couldn't. There were so many things you couldn't do.
Yeah.
And
plus the 80s and 90s, but in the 80s were pretty vicious, weren't they?
Yeah. They were. They were still whacking you at school.
Yeah.
So.
And so how did it hold you back? You saw other people making sports teams and things. You couldn't get involved in that.
Yeah, no, I think that's the issue that people don't understand with disabled people or parents or whatever. You go through these grieving periods of all of a sudden all your friends are in sports teams or dating or things like that, and as someone that might be different, you often get left behind. So you go.
Is that how you feel?
Yeah, well, I wanted a girlfriend just like all my other mates.
Yeah,
but,
so did I.
So you know that isn't easy.
Yeah,
and that still would be happening today. I would say that the dating scene for a disabled person is a nightmare.
Yeah.
Is a minefield.
Well, how do you approach that?
Well, I would say people have 2 ways. They would go, I'll say everything about me but that,
yes.
Or they would lead with it and then get no clicks.
What do you do? Lead with it or?
I think you just got to be. Well, it comes down to the individual because I think people are still, even in their 30s, 40s, or 50s, would still be a secret.
But you're such a positive guy, eh?
Yeah.
You know, you're so positive about your disability.
Yeah.
You haven't really let it hold you back in any way, have you?
No, because I think I used it as a motivation. But a lot of people, I mean, this industry is a pretty good mask for anything that goes wrong.
Yeah.
One thing about disabled people, depending on what you have, is there's often symptoms that you don't know. Pain, could be depression, sometimes it's neurological things. So usually there's a lot of things going on behind the scenes.
Have you got depressed as a result of it?
No, not me.
Good on you, mate.
No, that's not my thing.
Yes.
But I definitely have had some physical pain, back issues a couple of years ago, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
You know that 1 in 4 people would be affected by mobility or disability? And
Yeah. Is it 1 in 4 in New Zealand, is it?
Yeah. When you get a hip replacement, Duncan, you'll be moving into the mobility.
I've actually got a dodgy knee. I think I've got arthritis in my knee. I can't, even now
there you
it
go.
falls apart. So how well set up are we in New Zealand for disabled people? Like, you know, in this company here, it's
pretty good.
It's pretty good, I think. Yeah.
This building is pretty good.
Yeah.
Sometimes when people come to studios with microphones, they can't get them low enough.
Yeah.
That's an actual issue. These seats,
are shocking.
Not good for the first person who came in about this podcast. He said, this seat is not built for people with mobilities.
We had a tetraplegic in here, and it clearly wasn't no good there either.
Yeah.
But how is the wider sort of city CBD and sort of the country really? How's New Zealand set up for disabled people?
I think it varies wherever you go. The further away from the metros, it would be more difficult in terms of care and that kind of thing. I think that also funding was in the throes of putting this podcast together. Funding was right at the heart of this, and I had a lot of off-air conversations that weren't recorded about about people that deal with funding. So I put it down to a few things. One, that I thought 800 and something was a lot of money, but I would say that the governments haven't ratcheted the need up as the years have gone by.
So how does funding look for disabled people in New Zealand?
It depends where you are. Some people are fine, but I think when they made those cuts, that was tough on
so how big are the cuts? How big are those cuts?
I couldn't put a number on it, but when they just cut it off like that, that was massively.
This was last year.
Yeah, that was massively impacting on
What did they cut?
many. They just cut so many different areas.
Did they?
That they had all kinds of things that just didn't continue.
Right. And you felt that you saw that straight up.
Straight away with the guests that came in, because I haven't asked for funding, I couldn't specify anything that affected me. But there were caregivers that had less hours. I tell you what, there is a lot of people that do a lot of good work out there.
It's bloody miserable taking hours off caregivers who help disabled people. I mean, can you get any lower than taking hours off those people? Is there anything lower?
No, it's hard on them. I'll tell you, let me give you a couple of scenarios as why the government needs to think about it in a wider area. For example, if you looked after your disabled child or adult and you did your back in, so you'll eventually end up in the hospital system. The healthcare system always ends up at the end of the road, so you end up in ED or something like that. If you've got, people in wheelchairs sometimes pop their hip, so that ends up in the hospital system. If they had more community physiotherapy,
you need more primary care for the people.
This is the stuff that happens that always ends up. So when they think about funding numbers, if it doesn't move with the population and the amount of people, then it always ends up in the health system, which actually costs more.
Yes.
So there's a couple of other areas too that's worth mentioning, Duncan. Is one, management of it, because the way they stopped it like that was crazy. But two, the abuse of it. And there's always abusive systems.
So we know that, don't we?
There's always abusive systems. I'm not saying it's that most people are pretty good. Most people are grateful, but there's always some buggers that do.
So you're joining the podcasting world?
Yes. So this is called the Cerebral Palsy podcast.
Yep.
So this came about with one of the guys at work. He's got a wee daughter with CP. So we started having conversations. Me as a parent with cerebral palsy and him as a parent of a child with cerebral palsy, and we started talking about stories. I said, mate, these need to be told. So I started working with the Cerebral Palsy Society of New Zealand, who do a great job, by the way.
Yep. Had you had much to do with them before this?
None. I didn't even
know.
I didn't even know they existed.
Come on, man.
No. Look, when you're a disabled person, you've got to decide whether you want to embrace agencies or organisations.
And you didn't?
No, nothing to do with them. I got asked at about 15, do you want us to help a job? Do you want to join our soccer team? Like, no, no thanks. Do you want us to, you could wear they asked me once if I wanted to wear a thing on my head that could help me with a typewriter. I said I could do it with my hands. So people were just trying to be helpful.
Yeah.
But actually, I wanted nothing to. So I was an independent.
You wanted
person.
to be as normal as possible, right?
Yeah. So I can't. So this has been a little bit confronting, coming back, dealing with disabled people again.
I bet.
Because I think I got asked by the Achilles Foundation once, who do another great job, by the way. They are the people that take you over to runs, the New York Marathon, and they do it as a group. And they said, "Do you think you could do that?" And I said, maybe I could. He said, do you want to? I said, nah. But actually, the reality was I didn't want to hang out with the disabled people.
Do you see yourself as disabled?
Yeah, I do. Yeah. But you do forget, because, I would have, in the cerebral palsy world, I would have what you call gross motor function scale 2. I've got the diplegia type, which is just legs.
Right.
So, and there's various forms of that.
Right. So is yours moderate, or how do you?
It's pretty moderate, yeah.
Yeah.
It's pretty
still
moderate.
affects your movement, though.
No. I've got what I would call an obvious cerebral palsy walk.
Yeah.
So, but you know what? I'm grateful for the things I do have and the things I have got. And I was just listening to your mate over there with the sport talking about his new baby arrival.
Yeah.
When my son when I went into the maternity ward to see him born, I was petrified that he would come out with cerebral palsy. I didn't even tell my wife that. I was stressed to the max.
Were you worried it was going to be carried through the genes?
Yeah, well, and it can be genetic. It generally isn't, because it's usually some sort of brain damage.
Oh, so you went into the birthing unit that day, and it was just...
I looked at his legs immediately. When he came out, I was relieved.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I was super stressed, and I didn't tell anyone about that. I was super stressed about that.
And everything was okay?
He's fine. He as a little fella, he's 12 now, when he walked in front of me and mocked my walk, he got it so perfectly that it looked like I was making fun of a little kid.
Oh, wow. So how many kids have you got?
I've just got the one and a stepson. Too.
Wow, that's great, isn't it?
Yeah. So, yeah, it's for people listening, and it's all about the family and the far now and everybody in the disability world that are dealing with people.
You just confront your disability and you confront other people's issues.
Look, when I talk to them on this podcast, we talk about things. I talk to parents about feeling guilty. I talk to people about dating. I talk to them about symptoms. I said, what kind of things, when you wake up in the morning, what's the hardest thing? Putting your shoes on. You know,
what's hardest thing for you?
Yeah, putting shoes on.
Same with me.
Because I got a sore back.
Yeah,
all those things. Anything to do with your hips when they move differently, you get a sore back eventually.
Yeah. What sort of things? Like how far can you walk before you can't walk any further?
I can walk quite a long way.
You can walk quite a long way.
Yeah, I can do all right. I'm going to do the Sky Tower stair climb in a few weeks' time.
Why?
Because
you crazy?
No, because some of my mates died of cancer, so I do it for them. 1,103 steps. It's hard for me. It hurt. I was sore for 3 weeks afterwards.
Yeah, I can imagine it. So, what your do you have anything that you need to achieve? You want to achieve that you want to solve? You know,
look,
through your podcast.
This podcast, if somebody was listening who deals with a disability every single day and it gave them some information or gave them a little bit of inspiration just to help them get through the day if they're having a tough day, then it's done its job. You
need to get the disability minister on, because they've now got a disability ministry, haven't they?
Yes, they do.
Yeah, yes. Finally. So that's a good move. But immediately what they did was cut funding.
Yeah, immediately.
It's just unbelievable. I think the minimum wage for disabled people went down as well. Which, let's be honest, why pick on these people?
I know. Yeah,
you should get the minister on.
Yeah, totally. I should. But I've got doctors, athletes, mums, everyone on this podcast. We have conversations. I can ask questions that people don't ask because I can get away with it.
Yeah, it interests me that you didn't really talk or address or talk publicly about your cerebral palsy until now. It's taken all this time.
It's taken all this time, and I'm so glad that I've done it. It's been good for me.
I've seen you around the office. You've been uplifted in many ways, eh?
Yeah. It's been good for me because it just... I mean, I don't need to be reminded of it, but it made a difference.
Well, I think you're one of the good guys, Kris.
Yeah.
One of the good guys, mate.
Yeah, and I appreciate your support. I really do.
No, I've always supported you. I've always seen you around, always had you on the show, and, right the way back to Radio Live days.
Exactly.
You're the man. I reckon you take it in your stride. You're humble, decent, positive guy. You're a joy to be around. Okay.
If you want to listen to this podcast, look for the green logo.
Yep.
It's the Cerebral Palsy podcast. Cerebral spelt cerebral. It's got 2 R's in it.
Oh, is it?
Cerebral.
Now you got some homework to go and listen to all mine now as well.
Yeah, got it. Especially your mum.
Good on you, mate.
Garner.